There may be times in your life when you take on the role of the judge and you cast your judgments on others, and this creates polarization in life. And by creating this polarization, we often trigger those forces that end up giving us a slap of humility and bringing us back down to earth to realize the flaws in taking on the role of the judge. Now, when we grow up in society, many of us end up becoming programmed with what is considered ideal behavior, what is considered normal, good behavior. But at the universal level, there is no good or bad. And whenever we find ourselves taking on the role of a judge, we may ascribe a lot of importance to ourselves. And by doing this, we create this polarization. And that is why judgments can be so detrimental to us. Because at the end of the day, who are we to judge someone else? Because everyone is a victim of their own circumstances. And if we were to be placed in those very same set of circumstances and probably not have the same level of consciousness or play out that role in a very unconscious fashion, it is very likely that we will play out that exact same play script that we are judging. And so, judgments is something that we need to bring in conscious awareness to, so that we no longer fall victim to taking on that role of a judge, in order to avoid that slap of humility. Because that slap of humility, it can be very painful at times. I've fallen victim to this so many times. But one of the times when it really hit me bad, when I thought I made good progress in terms of doing a lot of the work, but when the pandemic struck, I found myself in that state, that unconscious state, unable to exercise that conscious awareness. And I fell victim to judging people, especially because of what was taking place, and the polarizations were at extreme levels. And I had started judging people for behaving in a certain way, especially people who were conforming to the rules that were being put in place. And in no way am I trying to give credence to what was done. But what I'm trying to say is that these circumstances come about to humble us, to tell us, who do you think you are that you can totally avoid judgment? You're not yet as far in terms of making progress towards being free of judgment. And it's events like this that create a scenario where it's very easy to judge someone for behaving in a certain way because you don't agree with it. And this creates that polarization, like I said, from a universal level, because there isn't that consideration of good versus bad. And when we create that access potential, we are impacting our own lives. And like I said, I'm not trying to give credence to any sort of behaviors. I recognize what was done, but how do we take that step back? How do we not judge the people who are conforming to the so-called bullshit rules that were put in place? And to do that, to be able to step back, it requires a lot of conscious awareness, to recognize that those people were victims of their own circumstances. And rather than playing into it, is to just take that objective step back. But oftentimes when we're caught up within that scenario, and whatever scenario it is, whether it's people in your very close circle and you may be very much engaged in the activity, and when we engaged unconsciously and we're not really thinking about it, it's very easy to put on judgments on others because of the actions that they take. And it calls for a lot of humility, because it's not easy to always avoid these type of situations. It's during these times when we feel like we're succumbing to that need to judge someone, that we need to bring in conscious awareness, wake up your dozing soul or your higher self and call in for that presence of God, because it's during times like these when we need to be more conscious, to be able to step out of that situation and step back as the observer and ask for God's guidance in terms of how God would like you to perceive that situation. The more better we can get at activating your higher self, calling in for that presence of God, the more we're going to get used to it, that whenever we encounter situations like that, we take that moment to just breathe and reflect on it before we fall victims into judgment. Because like I mentioned, these circumstances in life often end up coming back to hit us with that slap of humility when we do fall victim to judgment. Especially when we're giving judgments on others, it can be because we think they're lazy or they're not doing enough. There can be a way in which you can take on that role, and at some point in life you may have some sort of ailment that gives rise to you feeling in a certain way. For example, I used to place judgments on certain people because I thought they were lazy and they weren't doing enough to deliver certain work. And because of placing judgments, I created polarization. And that polarization came back at a later stage in my life and gave me a slap with this condition of hypothyroidism, where I felt very lethargic and I was unable to feel motivated at that time. And that's how these forces tend to come back and give us that slap of humility. And that is why I think when it comes to judgments on others, it's to recognize that and to reflect back on those circumstances in your life. Because if you have played the role of a judge and you have judged others for what they've done, I'm pretty sure you would be able to reflect on your life and find those instances when the universe slapped you back with that humility to recognize the flaws for having judged someone else. So hopefully this video has helped to shed some light into the importance of not falling victim to playing the role of a judge in life and judging others for their actions, deeds, because essentially people are just victims of their circumstances. And by judging others, we're creating that polarization. And when we create this polarization, we essentially attributing a lot of self-importance to ourselves, and that is activating certain forces, universal forces, that will end up leaving you in a situation where you get slapped with humility and recognize the flaws in having taken the role of the judge. So hopefully this video can help serve as a reminder. Like I said, there are times in life when you become so unconscious to playing the role of the judge, and it's during these times that we really need to bring in conscious awareness and call in for the presence of God to really reflect on that situation in a more objective manner. As always, if any of this content resonates with you, please do like, share and subscribe. And leave your comments down in the comment section below if you have any thoughts on this or experience anything similar with that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.